Hey guys, Rich from over the Fender Garage. Well, I've got my rear suspension here. It's a Detroit Speed kit. It's for a coil spring truck, and I have a leaf spring truck. I've kind of been running around doing measurements on this thing, and I'm yet to find why this won't work in this truck. So I'm at the point I'm going to start cutting and installing this thing. There's one cross member here that's in the wrong place compared to the coil spring truck, and it shocks. I don't know if that's the same place they're at in those, but so I had no luck finding anything for a leaf spring truck. I guess they're extremely rare. So you're kind of stuck doing what you got to do. And I see no reason why this won't fit. They say it's not made for a leaf spring truck, but I've yet to find anything that's wrong besides this one cross member. I do not recommend doing this on your own vehicle unless you call up Detroit Speed and Holly and talk to them about it. I do fabrication a little bit, so I'm comfortable doing this. If you're not, I really suggest calling them. But we'll go through this and we'll see why it's not supposed to fit. All right, I'll kind of walk you through what I've done here. I've done quite a bit of measuring. I have not found any reason why this kit would not fit. So I'll kind of walk you through it, show you what I've got going on here. But I still got the rear end mounted in here, because I didn't want to go cutting on anything until I'm sure. But I've taken the drop brackets here for the C-notch. So I've center lined that. I've center lined my axle. Then right now I'm just going to use this axle. I do have a 9-inch I'm going to put in it. But for right now I want to do this, because then I can make sure my back spacing and everything's all right. Since they said this does not fit a leaf spring truck, I didn't want to get ahead of myself too far. So I've center lined my axle. I've center lined this bracket because I'm not sure if all the holes will be the same. So I've got their notch transferred down onto my frame here. The height here, the height here, this all matches. There's nothing different. There is the shock that's got to be removed. So that's got to go. And then on the front here, it mounts, these two bolts mount into those two rivets, and then you got to drill a couple extra holes. But that lines up there. This measurement here is the same. This measurement in the front, this measurement down below is the same. So it wouldn't have any problem sitting there. The only thing I see is that the leaf springs always have this little bump in the frame. It may touch this right here. That's the only thing I can kind of see. And it's only going to be a tiny bit right here that it would even touch it. Other than that, there's no anything in the way besides this cross member here, which I'll take this cross member out. I either cut it down or get it to fit somehow on this, or I'll just fabricate a new bar across here to attach these two together. Because from what I've seen is that the coil spring truck has a brace across the top that sits here instead of this brace here that's on the leaf spring truck. But other than that, it's got the same little mounting area as a coil spring truck. It's got that same piece on it. The brake hose tab is here instead of in front, which I have no problem moving that. That's not a big deal to me. It's got to get all new brake lines anyway. So I don't see why the kit would not fit, since everything else seems to be the same. You see, it's got the same bracket and all that. So that should fit there. So other than that, you know, you get that bracket out of the front, that lower cross member there. Those two pieces out of there, the upper one, that whole piece opens up. Get the leaf spring buckets off the truck. And there shouldn't be any issues with that hitting anything. So I guess it's off the cutting, and we'll start installing this onto the truck. See what the problems we run into. Get this jacked up. Oh, when I did all this measurement, I did have the chassis level. I leveled out the chassis off the rocker panel here. It might not be level now, but I had to level on here, so it was level. And then I transferred all these down to the axle with the level. So I know that's really, really close to being in its center line spot. And I can drop a plumb bob if I want to, but I just used the level to do it. And probably I could move it back a tiny bit. That's what this marks here. So I can move back a tiny bit if I want to, because you know, an axle with the rear leaf spring, it's going to go back a little bit as it goes up. So I figured maybe 1/4 of an inch is how much you'd get out of a leaf spring, maybe less. So I'll just step it back a tiny bit. But once I get everything out of the way, some of these holes might line up to their bracket holes. That there are some that you're supposed to use to line stuff up, or different measurements and stuff, but we will see. Like these two holes, or one of those two holes goes into one of these. I think it's the back one. I haven't fully read all the directions yet. Just kind of do a mock-up in my head of what I'm doing here. But I know one of these bolt holes lines up with one of these rivets here. I know it won't line up with that one because this isn't supposed to be here. But let's get on to putting this thing on here. See what kind of problems we run into. There is all the leaf spring stuff removed from the frame. Took the cross member out and all that stuff here. So everything's good. All my marks are there from my center line for the rear end. So I've got something to reference off of. So everything's good on that. I got a couple more rivets I have to take off on that. I'm taking because you're looking at the piece here. So it's got the 4 holes there, and it's got the 4 rivets there. I think from what I see is that these 2 rivets will line up, these 2 will not. So I end up having to put bolts in there, I think. But it's got bolt holes in that already. These 2 should line up, these 2 will not. So we'll see when I get that part stuck up there. And do the same on this side. These 2 holes right there, I think will line up with those 2. And other than that, everything else looks good. Yeah. It's all going smooth so far. I think some of these holes are different. So I'm basically going off my measurements. Because I noticed when I watched their video, they were going off of some of these holes. And I look at my frame and I look at the coil leaf spring frame. And some of these holes are different on the truck that they're using. This is a 67 frame. I don't know if that makes a difference or not. I'm trying to figure out what's the difference here. But I do know that some of these holes are different. So I'm going off of my own measurements because the kit is for a coil spring truck, not a leaf spring truck. So I'm taking my time here. I don't want to mess anything up here. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to finish up putting in the notch brackets, get this stuff all in there. So I've got that done, and then figure out where to go from there on what I should do next. If I should get the front brackets in, or if I should mock up some brackets on the rear end so I can locate the rear end just in case the front stuff is in a different location. So kind of taking it as I go, very slowly, methodically check it, but I'm going to knock out getting these in there. So I've got that all figured out already. So let's get this part done. All right, here is my measurements I took before I started doing anything. I transferred it all onto the truck, got my axle center line, and this is the cutout that they send with you, with the kit. And I put it on there. Mine is really close to what theirs is. Theirs is a tiny bit further back on this one here, but it's pretty close right here. So we'll just go and put dash marks here, but their center line here is marked up with the center line of my axle, so that's in the right spot. And it says there's a reference hole here and a couple below. Well, I don't have those reference holes, but I do have a reference hole right here from the leaf spring frame rails. So I would take that that's going to be the same one, but it's just lower than. But I'm going off my center line here. That's mainly what I'm using. But that hole being here, their reference hole, and this hole here are in the same location. So it must be close. So take this back off. See how close I was to getting in the right location. So now I'm going to take and I'm going to cut this piece out. And let's drop this on here. Let's see how it's on there. Oh yeah. fits on there is really nice. So I'll go ahead and I'll run that one. I'll move this one down a little bit with theirs. I'll run this one in the same location right here. And I'll take that one out, leave that one out. So I'll cut on their spots. I have to open it up a little bit. I can open it up, not a big deal. But I gotta mark the underside with their little template here. I'll stick this back on there. Like that. And mark underneath. Mark underneath. All right. It's marked on the underside. So I'll go ahead and I will cut that out right there. I got to remove these rivets here. So go ahead and do that and get all that stuff out of the way. And then that one should be ready to pre-fit. Got the notch cut out here, and do is take stick a C notch up here, just like that. Check here. That. These holes. All right, I see those. That looks like. Ah, what if it's just loose? Ah, shoot. All right, I'm going to take and it looks like it's really, really close to those. All right, do that. I need to get this right about there, I think. Take another one here. That's tight up against the frame rail there. Right on my mark here. That there. This is all good. All right. That is good. So my center line is right there. If I bring this down, that's my center line on my axle. So if I take and measure across here, that is 34. 34. 34. So this center line right here is 34, which matches my center line on my other side and my center line that's already on my frame here. So this is all where it goes. The holes underneath do not match. They're off a little bit. So I gotta open the holes up a little bit, get those cleaned up. I mean, they're just like a hair off. Not very far. The other two, I can't get the rivets out of them, so I can't really tell. As soon as I drill them, I'll be able to tell. So that's not a big deal there. So basically, this is working out perfect on here. Everything is falling into its spot off my measurements. There's a lot of stuff on here that's not here that a coil spring truck would have, different mounting points. But from my measurements, it's all lining up in this same spot. So that's all good. The next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna run around and I'm gonna put all the drill holes in it, put it on, and then clean up these holes underneath here. And any hole I have to fill in, I'll weld it in and then re-drill it. But I don't think that that's going to have to happen. I think it's all going to go together pretty good on this part. So, drill some holes. Both of the C notches mocked up. Everything's pretty good. I got a line right there. Center line's right there. This one over here. Center line's right there. So the C notches fit without a problem. Everything's good on those. The only thing that's different is that this back one here is off a little bit. Off maybe a 32nd down there in the hole. You can't quite see it. I can't get the camera in there in a position to see it. Back to, I can't get these two rivets out of there, so I can't tell. I'm gonna have to drill them out. They do not want to pop out of there. So, drill those out next. And I missed one right here. So get those all drilled out. Get those bolts up there. And the C notches will be done. being mocked up. I'm not putting all the bolts in it because I have to take it all apart to paint it, so kind of waste of time putting all the bolts in it. I'm just putting enough in here to get it together, tear it back apart. But it's going together good. So far, so good. So the next thing I'll do is I'll either set the axle, start setting these kind of in its spot, because this is a weld on. This is not for a coil. It is a coil spring kit, but it's the weld on version. I figured that would be better because I've done a few of them. So I kind of know the ins and outs with those. And all the brackets, you weld them to the axle instead of you bolting them to the old coil track arm. So I figured I could get that to go my way better than trying to use the coil spring one. It's a good thing that they have two different kits, because if it was the coil spring kit, I don't think I could do this. See, this is their weld-on kit, so that these brackets go on here like so. I think this one goes this way, I think. Something like that. But one goes on the inside, one goes on the outside. So I figured I would have better luck if I had to modify something with one of these welding kits than the bolt-on one. I think it's all going to work out good. All right, I've got both the C notches bolted up. They're bolted up temporary, so I don't have all the bolts in them. Everything lines up with the exception of this one right here. This is the only one that does not line up. That one lines up. Those two line up. So I have one that didn't line up on that. Otherwise, everything else lines up. So the next thing I've got to do here, I'm going to bolt on this track bar and the spring, the top of the coil over spring. Get these bolted up on both sides, and then what I'm going to do here, I'm going to run a plumb bob from my center. These are the weld-on axle brackets. I'm going to center these with the plumb bob to make sure the shock is pretty close. And then I can take my lower bar, set it in its spot, so I can make sure that this is falling in its correct spot. Got the back brackets on for the coilovers. I've gone and I have my front brackets mounted up here with clamps. So I've found the location that they go. Now I've checked this, rechecked it, double checked it, quadruple checked it. Go through here. I have my center line for the axle, which I have my bracket. So I have my bracket set at 0. It might be at 1, but it's close enough for what I'm doing here. But it's basically, it's at 0. This is supposed to be vertical. This bolt hole lines up with that bolt hole. And then I run this direction. Ran the plumb bob from here to here to make sure that those were on track with each other. This is where the bracket would mount. You can see the bump from where the leaf spring was, both sides. This is the hole right here on top where this bracket goes, sets up there. So you have to use this bolt hole as alignment. It actually says to use both, but I'll show you in a minute. It doesn't match. This one does. So this is all lined up. Go over here. So I've got this one hung up too. It's in the same spot. And what I've got is I've got that bolt hole there. It's supposed to line up right there with that on their template. But this back one here does not line up. It's off. This hole right here is off. So if you take this, set it on there. See, that one lines up, that one doesn't. So that hole does not line up. Other than that, I have not found anything else that would keep this from working. When I do a tape measure off of this bracket to that bracket, I'm basically within 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch from their measurements. And it's just hanging up here, it's not bolted, so when I get it bolted up, it probably will come into it, but it is not bad for being just stuck up here. And this one here is the same thing. They're really, really close to each other. So I'm at the point where I'm going to start drilling, and I'm going to start mounting these ones up on the back. Because everything I've got measured up, it's all coming up that everything works fine. So when I get these mounted up, so make sure everything's square to the axle, then I'm doing it. And then I'll measure from this one to that one again, and I might have to change on the rear end the location of the brackets a little bit. And that's the only thing I could see that would be different. But even that, being within 1/4 of an inch on it, shouldn't come up bad. But I will go over it once I get all this stuff mounted up, bolted, squared up. We'll go through these and see, these are the weld-on brackets. You weld onto the axle instead of the ones that bolt on to the coil spring axle. So when I get the new axle in, the new rear end housing in, I'll put these on. Everything is coming up that it's going to work just fine. I found nothing to keep the kit from working, except for this bar here, which I still have the cross member that was in the front. See if I can get it on the back. If not, this will be the one piece I have to fabricate, but that wouldn't be bad, because nice to have a matching suspension all the way around the truck. and not have real nice in the back and half-assed in the back. It's got to have nice in the front, nice in the back. So let's get that stuff mounted up. On the chassis, everything's mounted up now. It's all temporary, but everything fits. Everything fits good. No issues yet. So the next thing I've got to do is I'm going to build cross member from that one to this one. And I'll hook it up underneath. I'll hook it underneath the frame here. I'll weld in some nuts. Bolt it here, bolt it here, bolt it there, bolt it on that side of the frame. So all this will be tied together. And that won't be an open spot because I'm gonna have to take that center one out of there because I think the drive shaft is gonna interfere. I think it's gonna come in this area here. But I'm not real sure yet. I'm almost positive that's going to have to come out of there. But this piece will be in there. And what I'm going to do, because that's not the rear end I'm using, I got one coming. I'm going to take this one. And I'm just going to take a couple of old exhaust pipes I got. I'm going to weld them here, just so I can get the rear end, the truck sitting on the rear end at ride height approximately. It might be a little lower back here, but this way I can look at my track arms, make sure everything's set right and I don't have any issues there. And then I want to be able to set the bed on here to make sure the wheel wells and everything, I don't have to lift any of that stuff. If I do, I'll know. And then I can get the rear end housing because I want to make sure I get the correct width. If I narrow it out a little bit or if I keep it the same. So I say I don't want to get ahead of myself because when you put the coil in, the coil overs in here, they're going to take up some space. So I need to know where it's going to be sitting from the tire. And then I need to know where the outside of the bed rail is. So if I want to go with a 315, 325, not sure yet. But I'll try to stuff as much rubber underneath it without ruining the bed space because I do not want to shrink my bed at all. I want to keep it full width to carry a sheet of plywood in the back of it. So that's got to be to where it works with that. So I'll get this down and that way I can run my exhaust while I'm waiting on the other rear end. I can get all that done. I can mount the gas tank up, make sure there's no problems there, which there shouldn't be. You'll be able to run all the exhaust through there. Then I'll have to find out about doing this cross member for the transmission. I've got it stuck up there right now. Get that one done. And the transmission sitting on it mounted. Then I'll be able to know if that's going to work when the rear end gets here. It's kind of finished putting the puzzle pieces together here, but that's one of the crucial pieces there, is to get that in there so I can get the truck sitting down on the ground, because right now the engine stands are sitting on jack stands. So if we get that thing mounted up, I can get my front engine stands made, and this will be down on the ground. I'll be able to make the exhaust system. Everything will be good. See what we run into for problems, but so far it's been great. Nothing's been a problem besides the one piece I gotta fabricate. Jump on doing that transmission to get it done.